Stage too, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can. Welcome to touring the AFC South, but this is different. Different, because I have along with me the halftime shows, Courtlandt Griffin, and we are kind of mashing things up, touring the AFC South, the halftime show, mashing it up together, and we are going to review the Titans 53. Yes, the 53 people that have made the Titans squad. So far, I should say. So far, because we've had a little bit of change as
A lot
well
of a
in the
lot of things to
last couple
change.
of days as well.
A lot of
So
things to
we're
change.
definitely gonna go over those different things, and of course, I just want to ask, just in regards to the 53, what do you think, Cortland? What do you think of just the 53 just as a whole they chose?
Um, I could see the vision. I could say for the first time in a long time, I can see a legitimate change in the mentality and the vision that this team wants to go in. Right. Before we get into it, just as a broad stroke, a lot more speed, um, a lot more versatility on this roster. And the Titans did something at a particular position that they haven't done in the past. So it's and it's also way younger. This roster got younger too, so it's interesting. I don't think it's a bad roster. I think it's a very well-rounded roster, and we'll see what happens when the season starts.
Definitely. And getting into that, we're going to start on this roster review with the offensive line. Now, let me give you just who made what on this offensive line. Now, we've got at centers, we got Aaron Brewer, who will be the starter, Xavier Newman, and Corey Levin. Now, Corey Levin just got cut and brought back, so just want to make sure to let everyone know that one. Then at guard, you have Daniel Brunskill, Dylan Radens, and Peter Skoronsky, which Brunskill and Skoronsky will more than likely be the starters. Then at tackles, you have Andre Dillard, Chris Hubbard, and Jalen Duncan. Now, there was a guy named Justin Murray there, but he got cut. Corey Levin got brought back. So that's what it is. And more likely, Hubbard and Dillard will be your starters. Of course, one name that is absent, that is Nicholas Petit-Ferrer. He is out for the first 6 games due to a gambling suspension. So expect this offensive line to go through another change as the year goes on, and maybe somebody will be missing again that made the team. But we'll see what happens at that point in time. It could be somebody at this position, could be somebody at another position. But I mean, what do you think of the pieces up front? With the Brunskill injury, Radens gets brought off a PUP right before they announced the final 53. I mean, what did you think of the pieces?
There was a couple of guys that I felt like should have made the roster. That didn't. I felt like Rupsich was a sure lock to make this roster. I thought Murray was a good lock to make the roster. I felt like those two guys played exceptionally well, especially in the first and second weeks of the preseason. Now, the third preseason game, of course, the starters kind of played a little bit more. They had Andre Dillard out there, I want to say like 3/4. So you really didn't get to see a lot of Murray and Rupsich out there playing a lot of snaps. But of course, this is the NFL. You never know, what this team is looking at and how they're looking and what they're looking at in their evaluation process. But just going off of course, what we've seen in camp and then what you see in the game, I kind of felt like Rupsich, who also made the practice squad, he may get called up. I mean, we never know. But I like Jalen Duncan, and I've been high on Jalen Duncan since the draft. Thought he was a guy who was a second or third round grade, falls to the 5th round, gets picked up by Tennessee. Vrabel is high on him. They like his versatility. They like his athleticism and his size. And outside of the Bears game, he played very well during the preseason. So Mike, like you said, some of these guys may not be on the roster once MPF gets back. But I think you could have a little bit of a battle between MPF and Jalen Duncan, and I think Chris Hubbard might be the odd man out.
I definitely think Chris Hubbard's going to be the odd man out, to be honest. But, of course, things have to play out. But, I'm just throwing something out there. What if this happened? What if, the Titans see somebody else they like? Now, I did mention that. I'm mentioning that because I see where Teron had talked about offensive tackle Tyree Phillips from the Giants. He got cut. Now, the Titans didn't pick him up, but he's a big athletic offensive lineman with more than a few starts in the NFL. I mean, could you see a guy like that potentially being brought in? I mean, I know it's probably not going to happen this week. It may happen, but, could you see a guy like that being brought in potentially?
So just from what I've seen, right, with the way that the difference between John Robinson, right, and Rand Carthon and Bob Brinker, right, and it's the difference between J-Rob and Austin Ford and that whole front office. Now that they're gone, this new front office is way more analytics driven. They're way more about the numbers and athletics and things of that nature. So I feel like he could be picked up. I could see that for sure. Like you said, big, height, weight, speed guy, violent hands. And when he played with the Giants, he gets beat with speed a lot. Like he gets, for all of his athleticism, it seems like he just doesn't move his feet sometimes. And we've seen that, right? We kind of got rid of that last year with the guy who will not be named. But as a right tackle, I could see it. A guy who comes in and maybe Hubbard gets beat one too many times, right? I could definitely see it if the analytics fit. But as of right now, I think Rand Carthon and Bob Brinker trust the draft process. And as we go through this roster, you'll see why I say that. I think they trust their draft process. They trust their evaluations. And I think they have the answer to that spot on the roster already.
Now, to me, I can definitely see what they're trying to do in the vision, but I just have a little bit of a question in terms of, what if one of the tackles gets injured? I'm just throwing it out there. Do you go with Radence at the tackle spot? Do you move Skronsky out to it, or do you bring in Jalen Duncan? In my opinion, I would probably put Skronsky or Duncan out there because I don't know if I trust Dylan Radence out there at the offensive tackle spot again, because we saw that picture before, and I don't think we want to see it again.
No, I think you put the one thing that Radens and a lot of Radens fans are hanging their hat on is that 49ers performance, right? Where he had a couple of plays where he seemingly stayed in front of Nick Bosa, right? And if you look at the entire, and I say seemingly because a lot of times he was just watching the man upfield, which as a tackle you want to see, right? But how many times did Nick Bosa make our quarterback cheat up into the pocket? And that interior 49ers, defensive line, which is a stud defensive line, right, make it hard for your quarterback. It doesn't always, just because a guy doesn't give up a sack, doesn't always mean he's doing a great job. Like you said, we've seen that before. I think Jalen Duncan is going to be better than some give him credit for. He's going to be better than his backup positioning is. And like I said, that's why I feel like the answer to that position is on the roster already. Also, a guy that I named earlier, Andrew Rupsich, who was an undrafted free agent last year. He also played well in the preseason. Like I said, I think one of those two guys, but I think you keep Big Ski, Peter Skoronski at the guard position. Didn't have a grade below 79 all preseason. Did not give up not one sack or pressure all preseason. I think you keep him at guard. That position has been hard to replace. And it seems like when we get guys in the Titans, get those guys in those positions, right? It seems like they always end up either leaving to go somewhere else or can't stay healthy. Well, Skoronski seems like the opposite. He seems like a guy who wants to be in Nashville, and he seems like a guy who can stay particularly healthy and pretty healthy throughout his tenure so far. So hopefully they keep him at guard. He has all-pro potential, and I know he played tackle and was one of the highest-rated tackles in college football, but as a guard, I like him where he is.
I hear you there. I mean, I often do wonder if he is going to wander out there and play tackle eventually, but, we'll see what happens. That's where they like him at. They like him at guard. But, one thing that's ultimately out there about the offensive line, they aren't going to be the finished product they're going to be in week 3 or 4 in the first game. I expect some holding calls on them. I expect a few different things to happen in the first game against New Orleans, especially with this group as they continue to know each other. Because technically, they really haven't been together that long of a time. It's only one guy that's on the offensive line that was there last year, and that's Aaron. Other than that, everyone else is different.
Yeah,
it's going to be
essentially 5 new faces because Brewer technically played the left guard position up until I think the midway point of last year where he switched over to center. And then the only 2 constants on the roster right now would be MPF and Brewer. So it's going to be interesting. Like you said, it's going to be interesting to see. I know Vrabel wants to not beat yourself, right? Not get the false starts, not have the holding calls. But I think, like you said, it's going to be some hiccups here and there. But this is a very well-coached team. I think you'll see a couple, but not like those ill-fated like drive killers that kill so many teams. But I think you're going to see something, but not to the point where it's going to be like, what are these guys doing?
Right. We'll see what happens, but hey, it is what it is. So there we go. We went over the offensive line, but we have to keep it moving. We're gonna move on to the tight ends and the wide receivers. Now, at tight end, we got Chika Kwanko, we got Trevin Wesco, and we've got Josh Wiley. At wide receiver, we got DeAndre Hopkins, Traylon Burks, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, Chris Moore, Kyle Phillips, who is on IR now, folks. So really, you can't count him towards the roster at this point. Colton Dowell and Kearis Jackson. Now, what I find interesting is the names that did not get mentioned. Racey McMath, Reggie Roberson, Mason Kinsey, not on the roster, which these 3 guys have been trying to make this roster. Well, Racey McMath has been trying to make it healthy. And Reggie Roberson, the last couple of years, impressive in practice, but just hasn't translated to the game. And then Mason Kinsey, you thought maybe with his return skills, potentially he would make it. And then plus with Jason, with Kyle Phillips out the first little
4
bit of
to
the
6
season.
weeks. Yeah.
Right. You would think Mason Kinsey would make it, but no, he did not make it. I mean, did that kind of surprise you? Because it surprised me.
No, it didn't surprise me per se. I had Mason Kinsey as a practice squad guy. And he's a guy who I feel like deserves his opportunity. He seems like the guy who's always the quintessential stay ready, right guy. Like always be ready to get called up. And when he's come in, he's played well, he gets open, runs the right routes, does all the right things, right? I just think there's more talent. The talent that got kept, right? I think is better and has a higher ceiling. They're all younger guys, not all of them, but the 2 guys at the bottom of the roster, right, are younger guys who have versatility. Colton Dowell can return kicks and punts as well, but he's of course more of an outside receiver. I kind of think I called him NWI light. He kind of gives me those Nicholas Westbrook-Ikhine vibes, right? Just a pair of sure hands who's fast and big and can do all the things that you want a receiver to do. But then Kearis Jackson, for everything Mason Kinsey is, Kearis Jackson, you can argue, is that now and has a higher ceiling. So I think the way the coaching staff is looking at it, he could be a game day call-up. He's on the practice squad. He resigned to the practice squad. He could be a game day call-up. He's a guy who's he's always there, does the right things. Like I said, is more of a practice squad kind of leader on the team, kind of, keeps the locker room light as well. So I think they kept him around for locker room and intentions as well. But I don't think his tenure is just a practice squad guy. He's definitely going to see some time on the field between the lines for this team.
Now, as far as Racing McMath, he ends up with the Colts on their practice squad. Reggie Roberson, I hadn't heard much about him, but I think he's going to end up on the Titans practice squad. I didn't know if he made the Titans practice squad or not. You know if he did
didn't. Or not? He didn't make the Titans practice squad, and the report that was put out was weird. So it said that he's not returning to the practice squad, but it also, and then when I looked through literally scoured the internet, scoured other reporters, when they asked some people that I knew that had some ears to the street on other teams, and they said that his name hadn't been mentioned, or, as far as that goes. So I was kind of wondering, was this a Titans decision for him not to return to the practice squad, or was this a Reggie Roberson decision to not return to the practice squad? right? Because he feels like he has a bigger market. Again, a guy who's a speedster, like you said, practices well, but when it gets to the game, it, it's up and it's down, right? Chicago had a great catch, right? Then practiced well against Minnesota, and then you heard nothing from him the last 2 weeks of the preseason. So, and I kind of felt like he had value as a return guy, but he also never, so they didn't put him back there on punt return and kick return. So it just kind of makes you wonder. He's one of those guys we just haven't heard enough, haven't seen anything. Jalen Rager just got signed by New England. Kind of makes you wonder. And then the Colts signed Racey McMath to their practice squad. It kind of makes you wonder if another team in the AFC South or a team that needs a receiver will pick up Reggie Roberson.
It'll be interesting to see what happens there. I mean, honestly, I thought he would make the team, but of course, in the last couple weeks, like you mentioned, he didn't really, pop out on the screen, which that disappointed me. But when I was out there watching practices, you best believe he was catching everything. But it just has to translate to the field, and that's what's frustrating. But I will say, hey, there's a UT Martin Skyhawk that is playing for the Tennessee Titans.
I know you was happy about that.
Yeah, I was happy about that, because I actually got a chance to interview him while I was out there. So, I talked to him a little bit, and I was interested. And then when Mike Vrabel, somebody asked him about Colton Dowell, he was talking about him. So he didn't really get to play in the Chicago game or the Minnesota game, and then got to play this game. And I was like, okay, well, he's setting us up to talk about he's going to make the practice squad. And then boom, he makes the roster. I was like, oh, okay then. Well, Mike Vrabel with the okie doke. All right. All right.
Mike is a cryptic guy, and I'm starting to kind of learn his ways, but he still has that kind of Greg Popovich kind of like mystique about him, where it's like you don't know what's going to happen, but I kind of like it better that way.
It's interesting. It's definitely interesting, and of course we do have to talk about the tight end position, Chig Okonkwo, and then we got a couple young guys. I think is Wesco a young guy? I know Wiley is. I just can't.
Wesco is He's a young guy. He's been in the league for I think 3 or 4 years now. So he's a young guy, but not like super young. He's like at that midway point. So
yeah. he's kind of hitting the point of the young veteran at this point.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting just to see how they use them. But to me, the way their tight end room sets up, you've got guys that can play H-back, tight end, and split out as well. So it's kind of like they value, like you mentioned, the versatility, and it's very evident in the tight end room here.
I think it's kind of and one guy that I'm surprised that didn't make the roster was Thomas Odukoya, right? Who's the 17th man on the practice squad because he doesn't count because he's an international program player, so he doesn't count against the practice squad number. But when I look at that, if you look at those big runs from Julius Chestnut or Tajay Spears, each one of them have number 89 in the picture. He's either clearing a block, it's a pancake, it's something. He was a blocker by every sense of the word. But if you know the Tennessee Titans and you've watched Tennessee Titans football over the last 4 or 5 seasons, they always have a guy who's on the roster and then off the roster, on the roster and then off the roster. It was Torrey Carter the last 2 seasons until he got cut, right? That could be Thomas Odukoya. He could get the call up depending on the matchup because he's a better blocker. And then Josh Wiley could, be popped down to the practice squad, right? Because he's more of a pass catcher than a blocker. He could develop into a good blocker, right? But he's more of a pass catcher. So like you said, that versatility, depending on the team that we face, if we're facing a more physical team, I can see Odukoya getting a call up from the practice squad.
We'll definitely see what happens there. Of course, we do have to move on. Got to stay on time.
For sure.
All right, the running backs position. We got Derrick Henry, Tajay Spears, and Julius Chestnut. Now, key thing in this one, Hassan Haskins gets put on the IR. I mean, honestly, do I see Hassan Haskins playing it down for the Tennessee Titans? I do not see him playing it down for the Tennessee Titans. I think this is kind of just a delay until he's done in terms of the IR, the court cases, things like that. That's what I think it is. I mean, are we on the same page with this one?
Yeah, and I think also something too, I don't know if you've heard about this, he's also on the commissioner's exempt list, so he can't practice or play in games anyway. So I think that 4 week kind of sabbatical is more of a soft suspension than it is he's actually hurt. He had the one touchdown in Chicago, and then after that, it was kind of the Julius Chestnut and Sam. I think it's Patrick. Can't think of his last name.
Patrick. The last name is Patrick.
Patrick, right? It was kind of those two guys kind of battling it out for that third wide receiver, not the wide receiver, but running back spot. So I think you've seen the last of Hassan Haskins in the Titans uniform, but again, it's just speculation at this point.
Right. And then as far as just 3 running backs, which that's different because usually the Titans carry a fullback. So like you mentioned, Tony Carter usually is the guy that's in and out of the lineup. He's no longer here. Now that this makes it even further evident that they're probably going to start out with 2 tight ends on the field, or go 3 wide receivers, which I would say more than likely 2 tight ends than 3 wide receivers, because that's just not what the Titans do. The Titans got to come out looking physical. So
right.
I mean,
this Tim Kelly offense is something different, man. And I think you're going to see a lot of still the physicality, smash mouth that Tennessee likes to run, but you're going to see a lot more wrinkles in this offense, a lot more motion in this offense than you've seen in the past. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Definitely. From the things I've seen, it's definitely going to be interesting. And speaking of interesting, quarterback position, we got Ryan Tannehill, Malik Willis, and Will Levis. To me, I was not surprised that these 3 made the roster. They were going to make the roster. Some people are still saying that there's a chance Will Levis will be the backup. In my opinion, after watching the preseason, after watching some practices, Malik is the backup. Let's leave it at that.
Can I just be the guy who says keep hope alive? I'm going to play devil's advocate here. And I think in a way, this is an extended backup battle, right? It's because Mike Vrabel still, for some, like, he hasn't said concrete that Malik Willis is the second quarterback. And somebody kind of made a good point on Twitter. They said, I think right now it's a 2A, 2B situation until somebody separates themselves. And I know Mike is a Malik Willis, fan. I like Malik Willis too. And I can't say that I don't. I think with Will Levis, he didn't show me anything that was glaringly horrible. He didn't show me anything that says he's ready to be a starter. Malik also didn't show me things that said he's ready to be a starter. So I think right now the coaching staff is just kind of looking at, we invested a 2nd-round pick in this guy. This new front office did not invest a 4th pick in Malik Willis. And they're always going to, if you know the business, right, you're always going to ride with your guy versus the past regime's guy. So it's going to be interesting to see too.
Oh, I hear you there. I just don't think that if it comes down to it, I'm not saying Tannehill's going to get injured, folks. Just don't. But what I am saying is that if in the case of anything were to happen, I think they would trust Malik a little bit more than they would trust Will Levis at this point. So that's just my thinking, and I think, of course, like we've talked previous times, Courtlandt, talked about Will Levis and Malik Willis in the offseason that's going to be next offseason when these two are probably going to be battling for the starting position. Given that, perhaps, I don't think they're going to bring Ryan Tannehill back. That's just my thoughts. They could, but just in my opinion, I don't think they are. And I think it's a battle between these 2 young guns who's going to be the starting quarterback.
I think they're setting themselves up to not bring Ryan Tannehill back. And the reason I say that, I know this is probably going to, this for a couple of seconds, $131 million approximately, right, next offseason to spend. I don't think you waste any of that money on bringing back a guy who you feel like you've reached your ceiling with. I think you take over. I think you let one of these young guys take over, see what you have, and then you build the rest of this roster. And we've seen that happen with a couple of other teams, right? San Francisco, to be is a good example. Built the rest of the team, built a defense, built an offense, and then they just kind of plug and play quarterbacks right now until they find their cement guy. And I think Brock Purdy has the ability to be that, but this isn't NFC West, touring the NFC West. This is touring the NFC South. So
Right. So, of course, we did talk about all the offense, went through the entire roster offensively, but there is a defensive side of the ball. We're going to take a quick commercial break and come back. We're going to talk about the defense and more on touring the AFC South. and the halftime show. We're doing a mashup on this episode. We're gonna take a quick commercial break.
A shift. A shift is something that happens and changes the dynamics. And that's what happened when Garrett Logistics was born. After 10 years as a sales pro in the logistics world of sporting goods, John Garrett decided to pivot to the world of freight and start a brokerage. So you're saying to yourself, why trust Garrett Logistics? Well, Garrett Logistics helps shippers improve overall workflow, along with increased on-time pickup and delivery percentages. Last-minute loads, multi-drop pickups, and more are part of the services with Garrett Logistics. They're available Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., and Saturday, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., all times Central Standard Time. So give them a ring at 615-400-8484. That's 615-400-8484, or you can email them at john@garrettlogistics.co or visit their website at garrettlogistics.co. Garrett Logistics, where the motto is, it's not just freight to us, it's your business.
All right. Now, before we get back into the talk about the Tennessee Titans and the defensive side of the roster, we do also have some halftime adjustments, of course.
Sure.
We got to talk about the halftime show. We got to talk about these halftime adjustments, and those are going to be talking about the other teams in the AFC South. Courtlandt, go ahead. You got it.
Yeah, so anybody who's tuned into the halftime show, y'all know how we do. Instead, we're doing this instead of the beginning of the show, we're doing it in the middle of the show because this is a true halftime report. So I'm just going to go and run down with the other AFC South teams. So for the Colts, right, wrong shoe. My question to you, Mike, is will the Indianapolis Colts regret releasing Isaiah Rodgers, who's recently signed with the Philadelphia Eagles, right, after his suspension? He's a guy who they felt like was a projected starter, a guy who they had a lot of high hopes on, a very young guy. I think he's only like his third year in the league. And now he's going to a already stacked Philadelphia team. And after next year, he can play. So do you feel like they're going to miss that guy, or do they have their answer on the roster?
Honestly, he was going into the last year. He was going into a contract year with them. I honestly don't think they're going to miss him quite as much. They're just invested in the young guys, and they're like, hey, we're going to throw them out there. We're going to see what they can do, and we're going to call it a day from there. It's going to be some pluses, going to be some minuses, but it is what it is. But, great thing for Isaiah Rodgers, he gets to actually be around a great organization, the Philadelphia Eagles. He is to learn from, a couple of the guys, a couple of the veteran guys out there, and, of course, Darius Slay being one of those veterans, and basically just gets to kind of soak in things, get himself together, so when he gets out there next year, he can maybe do some things for the Philadelphia Eagles. So, all in all, it wasn't like he was going to be the star of their secondary. They're still looking at Kenny Moore as second for that, but it just is what it is. He got caught doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. People can argue it up and down whether they like gambling or not, but it is what it is. He's not there. He's in Philly. That just is what it is, in my opinion. And they're going to go with the young guys and sink or swim with them.
All right, we're going to hop on the bus and go over to their Houston counterparts here, to the Texans. And it's the bottom line, man. We got to talk about it. So after multiple moves, have the Houston Texans finally solidified the offensive line? As we know, they had Laramie Tunsil, right? Shaq Mason and all of those guys. And it kind of seems like the offensive line is still a shaky part, and they have to protect the new investment in C.J. Stroud. They made a plethora of moves going in, after and during the preseason. So do you feel like the line is now a strong point for Houston, or is there more moves to come?
Honestly, I am not for sure yet. Talking to Steve Weish from the NFL Network, and he also mentioned that offensive lines, they're the people that get probably punished the worst in terms of the less of physicality in the training camps and things like that, because they need that physicality to kind of get themselves in position, work on their pairings, their tandem blocks, things like that. They don't really get that in the preseason. So basically, the first few games are kind of like an extended preseason for them. So, we'll find out more about that offensive line then. Laramie Tunzel, you knew he was going to stay there. They paid both their tackles. They gave them both extensions. They bring in Josh Jones from the Arizona Cardinals for a 5th-round pick, basically, and they get a 7th-round pick with it, of course. And then they bring in Kendrick Green from the Steelers with basically giving them a 2024 6th-round pick for him. So, in my opinion, what they're doing is they're trying to stack as many offensive linemen as they can so they can have as many combinations as they can to put them together, see what they can do, and finally find 5 offensive linemen that can block, they can run block, pass block, and be solid at one time. It's going to be just interesting just to see what that combination is. Now, we know the tackles are probably going to be the guys. It's just the interior is going to be the part that needs to be fixed or worked out.
Yeah, and it's rough. It's going to get rough. It'll get scary before it gets beautiful down there if that doesn't work out. But going down, the Gulf, over the Gulf to Jacksonville here, to the Jaguars, no empty spots. Jaguars may have the best roster in the AFC South right now. Like, they may have the most wealth of talent. But do you think after the cuts, as much talent as they had, do you think after the cuts that still stands true for the way that this roster is constructed in the division that they're in?
Honestly, I didn't think they had the best roster to begin with. The reason why I didn't think they have the best roster to begin with is because it's heavy offensively. Offensively, they've got everything you need. Defensive linemen. Offensive line has gotten better, so that isn't necessarily a sore point as much as it once was. And, tight end, running backs, you're deep there. So they were good there. Defensively, you're still, kind of figuring out who's your third corner. You got Herndon being your slot corner, which, that's kind of interesting in its own right. I mean, not to say he's terrible. I'm not saying he's terrible, but he's just, you probably could do better at that position. You got Williams, who is a shorter corner, out as an outside corner, which is also interesting as well. And then at your linebacker position, you're younger there. Olaquan, hey, he's going to make every tackle that's available to him. But you still have that linebacker position next to him. Still trying to figure that one out. Of course, they had a few rookies that were in that position last year. I think Lloyd will actually step up and man that position this year. And the biggest thing that I have a question about is rushing the passer. Still, they have issues rushing the passer. So that's why I can't give them the best roster in the division, because they still have an issue rushing the passer. Now, Trayvon Walker is very talented. However, he hasn't shown that he can consistently rush the passer and get there. Josh Allen, same thing, talented, hasn't shown he can consistently get there and make the play. You got Chase on as well. He's a guy that's he's a rotation guy who was a former first-round pick. So that just says right there to me, they don't have the most talented roster. They don't have people at every position to be like, okay, cool, I got to watch for that guy. I got to do this for this guy. They don't really have that at every single position. Like you would say, maybe the Titans would have that. Mm-hmm. So that's just my thoughts on their roster, but don't make any mistake about it. I still think offensively they could put up 30 points a game.
Oh, yeah.
I still think it.
Yeah. I mean, at least you didn't say they're a donut this year. So I think that's a good improvement. If you're not a donut, and if y'all don't know, that's you got nothing in the middle and everything outside. So it's if they're not a donut, we're good. But then I got to get to the Titans, which is the team of the night, right? The youth initiative. What do you think it says about this front office and also the coaching staff that they kept 11 rookies, including 5 undrafted free agents, on the initial 53?
To me, it says that they're trying to build a different type of culture there. It says that they're trying to get the best 53, not just the most familiar 53. Because if they got the most familiar 53, then some of these guys that got cut would still be here. But they're going to get more younger guys, more versatile pieces, like you said earlier, and then also just younger as well. But they're just going with guys that maybe fit the new regime better and what they want to do. Because, no offense to Racing McMath, but he just has not been able to stay healthy. He's a definitely a fast and big player, and that's intriguing in its own right. But he just can't stay healthy. You have a few other guys that were there, but you're just like, if I get in the pinch, can I move him here? Can I move him there?
Right.
And you really couldn't do those different things. So, definitely a lot of versatility and a lot of, the new regime picking guys that they think fit their system based upon analytics and just ability within those analytics as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think I'm just gonna give my 2 cents on this one. I think what it says about this team is that they trusted their plan, right? I think the one thing that I kept hearing about the Tennessee Titans was we don't know what they're going to do with receiver. I wish they would have drafted a receiver. I was one of those guys. I was like, man, if they just draft a receiver, this team is better off, right? And I think they trusted their process. They trusted the fact that their evaluations and their talent evaluation was the right one. All of your draft picks make the roster, right? And we've seen guys now, like it's other teams that have cut their 4th round draft picks, cut their 3rd round draft pick, cut their 7th round draft pick. All of the Titans picks made the roster. Then on top of that, you go into the undrafted market. Otis Reese, Kearis Jackson, Anthony Kendall, like 5 of those guys, Caleb Murphy being maybe the best one, right? Make the roster. Like, and then of course on the practice squad, you got Armani Marsh and a couple other undrafted guys that made the roster, or made the practice squad. So I think that just to me says that Ran Carthon trusts his scouting. He trusts his analytics department. They trust, like you said, they got the right 53, the most talented 53, and not just the most familiar faces. But it says to me that this team goes into their evaluation process and says, we trust our evaluations, not so much as we trust the veterans that have just been here in those schemes.
Right. Definitely going to be interesting with the questions you asked me. It's definitely going to be interesting just to see how all these things kind of shape out with all the teams in the AFC South. We're going to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to flip over to the defensive side of the Tennessee Titans roster. We'll be right back.
You ever missed your mom's home-cooked meals? Well, you're not always able to get to those, but you are able to get to H&T's Home Cooking. Established in 2005, Patty Palin and her staff go out 6 days a week to create some of the best homestyle meals you can taste and at a fair price. So if you're in Nashville and you'd like chicken and dressings, green beans, macaroni and cheese, and other things, stop by H&T's Home Cooking. The address is 2264 Murfreesboro Pike, Nashville, Tennessee 37217, and they are open Monday through Thursday and Sunday 11 to 6:30 and Friday 11 to 7. And if you want to order online, of course, the option is available as well at hthomecooking.com, or you can call 615-367-0049. H&T's Home Cooking, food for your soul.
All right, and we are back, and we're going to flip over and talk about the defensive side of the Tennessee Titans roster. And we're going to start with, in my opinion, the best part of the defense, which is the defensive lineman. You've got Jeffrey Simmons, Danico Autry, you've got Tierra Tart, you've got Naquan Jones, you've got Jason Peavy. Jayon Peavy, I'm sorry. Jayon Peavy, what can you say about him making this roster, Courtlandt?
So Jaden Peavy is a guy who's very intriguing. Right?
Jaden, I'm sorry. Jaden Peavy. I completely butchered his name. Sorry about that, Jaden.
Nah, man, you good. You're a big dude, though. Jaden Peavy is a guy who's very intriguing. Last year went undrafted. A guy who I felt like was a 4th round. I had a 4th round grade on just because he was, for all of the big athleticism, raw size that you want. Sometimes he lacked the hand violence. Sometimes he kind of took plays off, which you don't want to see in a defensive lineman. But when he's on, he's on. When he's activated, he's activated. Terrell Williams, of course, they get him as an undrafted free agent. Terrell Williams gets his hands on him. If you know who Terrell Williams is, and Mike knows who Terrell Williams is, he's very good at developing front 7 talent. I don't care if you're a 1st-round draft pick or an undrafted guy. He's very good at getting the best out of his guys. Terrell Williams had high praise for this kid. Great hands, great feet. You saw the activity. You saw the violence. You saw the consistency, which was huge for him. And now you see it. I think him making this roster is huge because Tier Tart was a guy who was a long shot to make a roster, right? Another undrafted free agent comes in, makes the roster, and now he's a guy who's looking at getting a big payday in the offseason from the Tennessee Titans. Jaden Peavy could be that guy as well. Naquan Jones was another undrafted free agent guy, right? Comes in and makes the roster. He's also on the roster as well. But Jaden Peavy is in that long line of diamonds in the rough that Terrell Williams has developed and now can make an impact next to Jeffrey Simmons and Danico Autry.
Yeah, I will say this. Jeffrey Simmons, Danico Autry, and I've said this previously, they're probably the best inside lineman tandem in the NFL. Again, I'm going to say this. Jeffrey Simmons, Danico Autry, best interior defensive lineman pairing in the NFL. Fight me if you don't like it.
Oh, they're the best. They're the best. They're hands down the best interior pass rushers. And that's per Pro Football Focus. That ain't Courtlandt Griffin's numbers. That is per Pro Football Focus. They're the best interior pass rushing tandem in the NFL. So do with that what you will.
There we have it. Now with Tier Tart, he kind of sandwiched between. You just brought him up. Tier Tart sandwiched between Jeffrey Simmons and Danico Autry. Now, I am going to talk a little Danico Autry when we get over to the outside linebacker position, but we'll get there in a second. But sandwiched between those in the regular base defense, how big of a year do you expect from Tier Tart, which I like to call him Sweet Feet, because when he gets in there, man, he is a big man, but he can sweet
move.
Feet.
Definitely can move. I think it's going to be a huge year for him. And the reason I think is because I think this is the year I think he comes in. Of course, it's the contract season, right? And every guy performs on his contract year. But at the same time, this is the year where the Titans look at him as more of a leader than just another guy. I think in previous years, he was just looked at as a guy who was, hey, we need you to be consistent, right? Do your job, make sure you fill your gap, do your assignments. And then you'll flourish. And we've seen that. And then this year, I think they're looking at him as Jeffrey Simmons is a captain, right? We've got some new faces. We need you to be more of a leader, more of an example than just another guy. I think it's going to be a huge year for him. If I had to give a projection, I'm looking at somewhere between 30 and 35 tackles. I would say 10 to 12 tackles for a loss. Maybe five sacks as a nose tackle, one tech, right? I think that's a big year for him, and that'll yield him about $6.5–7 million a year as a interior defensive lineman on the free market.
Yeah, I mean, 5's a little higher than I would have gone. I gave him 4, but not by much. But yeah. I'd say I'd give him 4. But hey,
I mean, with approximately $131 million, I think the Titans would throw 6s away just to keep him.
Yeah. No. I was talking about just the amount of sacks. Money. Yeah. I mean, hey, I can see that, but as far as the amount of sacks he can get, I'd give him about 4. But hey, we're not far off from each other on that one. So we agree.
And I think with Danico and Harold and Arden Key and those guys funneling, that pocket, right, closing that pocket, he's going to get a lot more sacks by proxy than the ones that he gets just by putting the center back in the guy's lap. So I gave him a little bit more of a 1.5 extra. I got you, Tier. I got you back.
All right, let's move on to the linebackers now. Put the inside and outside linebackers together. I'm going to go with the inside linebackers first. Azeez Al-Shaair. We have Jack Gibbons, Luke Gifford, Monty Rice, and Otis Reese IV. That's the inside linebackers. Outside linebackers, we got Harold Landry, Rashad Weaver, Arden Key, Caleb Murphy, and the newest Tennessee Titan, Trevis Gibson. So, to me, just wow, a very, very deep linebacker core. Now, I will say this, not necessarily in terms of deep on the interior. I would say the outside, very deep, because you can also throw Danico Autry at outside linebacker as well, which some folks, if you're new to watching the Titans, then, Nico Autry pretty much can play anywhere along that line.
Dude's a freak athlete, man.
Yeah, he just got you know how you know someone, you know how you tell someone says you know, a guy that's playing and people are playing, you got the athletic dude over here, but you got the guy that just knows the game and can get to where he needs to go.
Right.
He don't really train on all the positions. He just know where he needs to go. That's Nico Autry to me. He just basically get out there and he do what he does and he gets the quarterback. It don't matter if he lines up interior or outside. He just makes it happen.
I'm so glad we was able to sign that dude from Indianapolis, man. That was a big steal a couple of years ago.
Right. Now, as far as you know, how big of a return is it for Landry? I mean, how big of a boost does that give this outside linebacker core, in your opinion?
I think it's a huge boost. You get your leader back. You get your guy that you thought was good enough to deserve a multi-year deal, right? One of the top 10 paid. He's one of the top 10 pass rushers by the money, and I think talent-wise, he's one of the top 10 pass rushers in the NFL. When he's healthy, he's easily one of the most effective speed rushers in the NFL, right? It's not going to kill you with a lot of power, but he's also versatile. Here's a crazy thing. He got a pressure as an inside linebacker and a pressure as an outside linebacker in this one game that he played in the preseason, which was week 3 against the Patriots nonetheless, but it was still like the fact that he was versatile and able to do that. And I think this also makes the job easier for the interior guys, right? Jeffrey Simmons and those guys, because they can't be double teamed now. You have to now make a decision if you're an offensive line opposing an offensive coordinator. Do you double team 96? Do you double team 93? Do you double team 98? Do you double team 58? Or do you double team 49, which is Arden Key, right? It's one of those things where it's like all 5 of those guys can get a hat on the hat matchups. And we've seen what this team can do when they just rush 4 or 5 guys, right? It's pandemonium, and somebody's going to hit the ground, and it's not going to be them. So it's going to be very interesting to see number 58 back out there in two-tone blue, definitely against some of these guys on the island where he thrives in those situations.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be fun to watch, you know, and definitely it was interesting. And again, Teron Davenport, if you don't follow him, he gives great coverage for ESPN for the Tennessee Titans. And he noticed one thing when Harold Landry came back out to the field. He was not wearing a knee brace when he came out to OTAs and training camp, which that's amazing, being that he was still at that point less than a year removed from tearing his ACL, which I thought was amazing. Now, you spoke about it, the addition of Arden Key. Now, Arden Key hasn't necessarily had the highest sack totals, but his energy is infectious. I mean, Jeffrey Simmons talked about it and just the different element he brings. I mean, besides getting a high amount of sacks, what do you think it is about Arden Key that just sets him apart from any other, I guess, outside linebacker that the Titans have?
Just from experiencing them in the offseason, Harold's more of a quiet leader, right? Harold's kind of he's the Vrabel guy, right? Head down, lead by example, quiet, right? Just I'm gonna go out, I do my job, I get sacks. That's what I do. That's what I get paid to do. I go home. Danico is, like you said, just the guy who knows the game, right? Headsy player, just does it all. Arden is the noise. You hear him before you see him, and when you hear him, you know who it is, right? He's the guy. Like, okay, like for second day of OTAs or mandatory mini camps, I should say. Of course, Big Jeff is out there, right? He's a vocal guy, very boisterous, right? But then you hear Arden, right? It's all the rookies. It's all of these rookie guys, like these young guys who are just like on the roster, camp bodies, right? And you hear Arden like literally come over there after the defense got a win. It was like, hey man, why ain't y'all cheering? What's wrong with y'all, man? Come on, bro, turn up. Like this is him. Like that is him. If you're not excited to play football, he's gonna realize it, right? He wants to, in the words of B. Dawkins, he wants to see how much you want to play football. And he wants his guys to also know how much he wants to play football. And it's going to be different because it's I think I saw that kind of difference in infectiousness when Darren Bates came to the team. He kind of gave us that energy, right? He kind of was that energy guy. even though he was just a special teams guy, he was that energy guy on the sideline. Arden Key is now going to be a starter projected, right? And have that energy. It's going to be infectious. Even when you think the Titans are down and out, right, or whatever, or if the momentum may not be on their side, that guy, number 49, is going to bring energy and is going to get these guys pumped back up and go out there ready to play football.
It's definitely going to be interesting to watch and see what happens and how his energy is infectious. But, the biggest question that we all have is we noticed a particular gentleman didn't take over the inside linebacker spot that's a lot projected he would. That's Monty Rice. Instead, it's Jack Gibbons, affectionately called Dr. Jack.
Dr. Gibbons.
Yeah, Dr. Jack, Dr. Gibbons, whatever they want to call him. They just put the doctor in front of it. But, Aziz is definitely the starting linebacker, and he's going to be the guy there. But I still have questions and wonder about Jack Gibbons. I will say he's definitely earned his starting position. He's been where he's supposed to be. He's done what he needs to do. However, I do question and wonder in passing situations, is that what's going to get Monty Rice on the field again? Because, of course, he's in a backup role now as opposed to being a potential starter like some expected or some thought. So, to me, I think eventually Monty Rice is going to be on that field. I mean, am I crazy to think so, or am I thinking Jack Gibbons going to find a way?
I think Jack Gibbons could find a way. I think they like his versatility. I think they like the fact that he's a faster, sideline guy. I don't think this is the final iteration of the inside linebacker position for this team. A guy that, of course, I like Monty, and I think Monty is going to find his way to the field at some point. But I can't say that I don't like the addition of Otis Reese. He's a guy that I was high on, that they've been high on. Safety convert. He plays at around 225. I think he could put on a little bit more weight in that. But he had a play in Minnesota where he got both hands on the ball, not a bat down, it was almost as clean an interception as you can get. He drops it, of course, which is why he plays defense. No offense, Mike, but it was interesting to see that he made the roster, and I think they like him. But like I said, I don't think this is the final iteration of that position, and there's some guys that I got some interest in that could be in two-tone blue before the end of the year, I think.
We're definitely going to watch and see. But, of course, we do have to move on. We do have our last and not our last and final, but last and final defensive area. That's the secondary. At cornerbacks, we do have Mr. Dildor, who was brought over from the Chicago Bears. And he's added to a cornerback room that has Christian Fulton, Roger McCreary, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Trey Avery, and rookie Anthony Kendall. Now, at safety, you have Kevin Byard, Amani Hooker, Elijah Molden. You've got Mike Brown, and you've got Matthew Jackson, who is a local guy. So there we go. So that's who they brought in. You've got Anthony Kendall and Matthew Jackson, which, those guys, I don't think anybody saw them out of preseason making the team. And you've got Mike Brown as well. Did Anthony Kendall probably surprise you making the team?
So he didn't surprise me making the team because I had him making the team. I had him making the practice squad, but I had him making the team because Caleb Farley started the season on the PUP list. And I said it, I was like, if this guy starts on the PUP list or the IR, then Anthony Kendall is my next up because he's another big, fast, physical guy that Vrabel likes. And so I definitely see Kendall playing a kind of a role, but again, the guys in front of him, right? Christian Fulton, SMB, Roger McCreary, Trey Avery, those guys are going to play most of your big time snaps. Kendall will probably, come in if there's an injury or two.
I'll say this. I do see Trey Avery eventually carving out a role. I don't know. I think eventually he might pass up Roger McCreary, to be honest. If he hasn't passed him up already, I think eventually he will, because it just seems like Vrabel loves that man. It just seems like he does.
Yeah.
Because, I'll give you an example why. Because remember when you were talking about the punt that hit Avery in the back of his foot, and how Mike Vrabel is not a stickler for not beating yourself. He actually goes and hugs Trey Avery, and Avery goes back on the field. I knew at that point, I was like, yeah, he loves Trey.
I was going to say, because I was like, I just knew, because I tweeted it. I said, if Trey Avery gets cut, it's because of this play, right? And because, like, of course, knowing Mike Vrabel, he's a stickler for the small things, right? Don't beat yourself. And those things are just like, because, I mean, Kearis Jackson comes down the field like, fire. Like, in other words, to get out of the way, the ball is somewhere in between, and Trey Avery sees the ball and is like, okay, I'm going to jump over it. Like, get over the way. So I didn't see that part. I think you were at that game, I believe. So, or was that in Minnesota?
I think it's Minnesota.
Okay,
that's
so
Minnesota.
But I didn't see that part. But again, that speaks volumes. Vrabel, it's not many guys that Vrabel coaches up personally, and if you're a guy that he does that too, he either really likes you or you did something really bad.
Yeah, it was. Anything else surprise you? I mean, honestly, I see a versatile safety position as well, because Elijah Molden, for those that aren't aware, he can play corner as well. So it's a lot of different moving pieces within that secondary. It'll just be interesting to see where some of these guys go on special teams too.
Yeah, the only thing that surprised me was Armani Marsh not making the roster. He's a guy that they brought in as an undrafted free agent, of course, and he played more corner than he did safety. He kind of reminds me of Michael Griffin when they brought Michael Griffin in, right? They brought him in. He was a natural safety. They brought him in. He kind of tried to play corner, but he looked horrible at corner in the preseason. He goes back and plays his natural free safety position. He's one of the best free safeties in Titans history, right? So that was kind of a surprise. I thought Armani Marsh was going to make the roster as a safety, which is his natural position. He's a guy that Vrabel liked. He's a guy that that Coach Harris liked as well. So, but he's on the practice squad. So again, some of these guys are sticking around, just not on the active initial 53. But that doesn't mean that they don't get action.
Gotcha. Okay, and the last thing we want to talk about is the kicker position. Now, we know that has been an interesting position. I mean, you saw two young kickers, then all of a sudden both of them are gone, and you bring in Michael Badgley. He kicks for the preseason finale. You hear Mike Vrabel talk about him at the end of the preseason finale in the press conference, and then next thing you know, he's gone. And so I was like, wow, okay, because, I mean, just listening to Mike Vrabel talk about him, I was like, I don't know. He may keep him around, kind of work on a few things. Then boom, Monday he's cut. I was like, wow, he brought him in for a weekend. Might as well say he just he took him on. He basically gave him a paid football vacation for the weekend, basically. So, and then you trade for Nick Folk, which is he's a 38-year-old kicker. He's a veteran. He's been around a while, and basically traded a late 2025 pick for him. And then you also bring in Cade York to your practice squad. So I got to ask, do you feel better about the kicking position now than you did at the start of preseason with what they've done?
Yes. Anything was better than what we had, right? Randy Bullock was spotty, to say the least, right? He was here, he was there. Some kicks he made, the ones that you thought he wasn't going to make, somehow he hooks it in. The ones that should have been gimmies, he hooks it out, right? It's just one of those weird situations. Badgley, I'm surprised that they brought Badgley back, because his showing in his previous stint as a Titan wasn't great. And then Trey Wolf and Caleb Shudak, right, in the preseason, it just seemed like what you got with one, right, like 1 week in practice and in the game, the other one lacked. And then it was like they would switch places, like they switched legs somehow, some way. And so I wasn't surprised that those two guys got cut. But then when you look at it now, Nick Folk comes from New England. He's now a Titan. He's more consistent, even at 38. He's more consistent, right? 83%, made 83% of his kicks last year. Also is a very good distance kicker. And then Cade York, right? For those who don't know, he's an Auburn product, right? Made the legendary kick to beat Alabama in the Iron Bowl, right? Comes into the league, has all the promise. And just for some reason has had some trouble getting the concentration down that you would like to see out of a kicker. I think, like I said, Vrabel and this team trust their staff, they trust their development, and I think you're going to see Nick Folk kind of stick around. I think maybe for a season, and then they're going to see what they have in Cade York, and you may see Cade York move forward as the Titans kicker.
Honestly, I don't think Cade York basically stays on the practice squad the entire season. I think eventually Nick Folk maybe slips up a little bit and they move him up. I think that may happen halfway through the season, to be honest.
That could be because Cade is only like what, 28, 29? I think something like that.
Not for sure, but it just, to me, I just don't see it. The Titans are getting away with having an extra guy on their practice squad just because of our guy at tight end. So that's why I think he's even on the practice squad to begin with. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, that's the whole Titans 53-man roster. We just went through it all in one night. I want to thank you, Courtlandt, for joining in on this collaboration with me. Tell everyone where they can find you on social media, and also tell them about the halftime show.
Man, you can find me at DC Griffin on Twitter or X, I should say, and DC Griffin on Instagram. You can definitely find me those two places. You can also find the halftime show every Thursday night. We didn't do it tonight because, of course, we're collaborating with Touring the AFC South, the best AFC South show on the airwaves. You can catch Thursday nights, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. We talk everything, right? We just got done talking my top 10 at every position going into this season, and then we're going to be kicking up because it's crazy. Tomorrow is September. The season will be starting, and then in a month we're right back into the NBA season. So it's going to be the halftime show is kicking up. We're going to have great guests. Definitely got to get Mike on the show, and definitely talk some AFC South for sure. But yeah, man, find me there. Also find my work at the 3-point conversion. You can find my big board. You can find Titans articles, WNBA articles. We talk all things sports over there. So definitely be on the lookout.
All right. Thank you again for coming on, everyone. If you're looking for me, you can find me on social media, the artist formerly known as Twitter. You can find me on there at Mike Patton 82. That's MikePatton82. You like that one? Like kind of the ode to Prince.
That was a good one.
Then you can also find me on Threads and Instagram at that's THA, not THE, _general_MP. Of course, Touring AFC South, you can find on YouTube. Find it on also on all listening platforms, which include Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio. Did I mention it again? Yeah, I did. And more as well. So I just want to thank you, everyone, for tuning in to our collaboration. Who knows? We may do it again. We'll see what happens.
It's always a chance. It's always a chance.
Always. Touring the AFC South and the halftime show collaboration. I think it went well. What you think?
Oh, for sure. Definitely.
All right. Well, stick around. See if we do it again. We're out. Peace.